This message found you because your consciousness has been operating in what quantum physicists call an ascension readiness state, a specific frequency where awareness recognizes that reality operates in levels and that most people spend entire lifetimes on the lowest rungs without ever perceiving that higher levels exist. And right now, in this exact moment, something inside you is recognizing this truth because you've been feeling it, haven't you? That strange sensation that there's a ladder you're supposed to climb, but everyone around you acts like the ground floor is all there is. The fact that you're here watching this video is not coincidence, it's synchronicity at its highest level. Your quantum field has been sending out signals, desperately seeking the frequency that can help you understand what climbing actually means and why the vast majority of humanity never even attempts it. And the universe responded by guiding you to this exact transmission at the moment when you're standing at the base of the ladder, looking up, wondering if you have what it takes to climb. You see, there are billions of people living on the ground floor right now, completely unaware that floors above them even exist. But only a specific type of consciousness, your type of consciousness, would stop and feel the magnetic pull of these words. You've been selected by the quantum field itself because you carry something most people don't, the climber awareness. This isn't metaphysical wishful thinking. This is quantum mechanics. Your consciousness doesn't just exist at one level. It has capacity to move through multiple levels of reality perception, each level revealing truths that are completely invisible from levels below. Scientists call this the observer altitude effect. But here's what they don't tell you. When your observer function remains locked at ground level, you don't just miss higher perspectives. You literally cannot perceive that higher perspectives exist. The ladder is invisible to those who haven't begun climbing. Think about your life right now. Can you feel how your perception has been expanding? How things that seemed impossible or irrelevant months ago now feel accessible and important. This isn't just personal growth. This is your consciousness beginning to climb. Each rung of the ladder represents quantum leap in what you can perceive, understand, and create. And most people never take the first step because from ground level the ladder itself is imperceptible. But here's the strangest part. You've probably noticed that as your awareness expands, certain people become uncomfortable around you. Conversations that used to flow easily now feel strained. Relationships that seemed solid now feel unstable. This social friction occurs because you're beginning to perceive from higher rung than those around you. And the difference in altitude creates communication gap that neither side can fully articulate. Your friends and family might not understand what's happening to you because they're standing on ground floor, where reality seems solid, predictable, limited by laws that appear unchangeable. But you've always sensed that reality has levels, that what's true at one level becomes obsolete at higher levels. You've had glimpses, maybe brief, maybe profound, where you perceived from elevated perspective and saw that limitations accepted as absolute at ground level are actually negotiable from higher altitude. This recognition you're feeling right now, this isn't your first encounter with ladder awareness. Your soul has been preparing for this climb across multiple lifetimes, multiple cycles of expansion and contraction. Every moment when you outgrew a limiting belief, every time you transcended a pattern everyone else accepted as permanent, every insight that revealed reality as more fluid than you'd been taught, they were all preparing you to recognize the ladder and begin the conscious climb. But here's the thing that will either liberate you or keep you stuck on lower rungs forever. Most people who recognize the ladder make the same critical mistake. They try to climb using the tools and strategies that worked at ground level. They believe that if they just work harder, think more positively, or follow the right techniques, they can ascend to higher levels of consciousness. This is like trying to climb a vertical ladder by walking forward. The movement is real, but the direction is wrong. The quantum ladder isn't climbed through effort or accumulation. It's climbed through release and recognition. Each rung represents not something you gain, but something you let go of. Every belief you transcend, every identity you release, every story you stop believing. These are the movements that lift your consciousness to higher levels. The ladder is already there. You don't build it, you simply stop clinging to the rungs below. Right now, as you're listening to these words, something unprecedented is happening in your quantum field. Can you sense it? That feeling of resistance dissolving in ways it hasn't dissolved before. That sense of weight lifting that you didn't consciously know you were carrying. The mere act of recognizing the ladder begins to activate the climbing mechanism in your consciousness. This is why this message found you at this exact moment. Your higher self orchestrated this encounter because you've reached the altitude where conscious climbing is not just possible, it's inevitable. Your experience lately hasn't been ordinary, has it? Even if you can't fully articulate what's changing, you sense a fundamental shift in how you're perceiving reality. There are specific phenomena occurring in your awareness right now that confirm you're standing at the base of the quantum ladder, and that what I'm about to reveal applies directly to your current state. You've been experiencing moments of double perception, times when you simultaneously see reality from two different altitudes. The ground-level perspective you've always known, and a higher perspective that shows you the same situation completely differently. It's disorienting because both perceptions feel real, but they contradict each other. What looks like a problem from ground level looks like an opportunity from higher perspective. What feels like limitation from one angle feels like creative constraint from another. This double vision occurs because your consciousness is straddling two rungs of the ladder. One foot still planted in familiar territory, while the other reaches for higher ground. And your dreams have become instructional. Not symbolic anymore, but direct teaching about how reality works at levels you haven't consciously accessed yet. You wake up with understanding you didn't have when you fell asleep. Complex concepts that would take hours to explain feel completely clear in the moment after waking, even if they fade when you try to articulate them later. This happens because during sleep, your consciousness naturally rises to higher rungs of the ladder without the resistance your waking mind creates. And higher altitude perspectives download directly into your awareness. The things that used to motivate you don't work anymore, do they? Goals that drove you for years now feel hollow. Achievements that seemed important now feel irrelevant. Desires that consumed your energy now seem childish. This isn't depression or loss of purpose. This is your consciousness outgrowing the reward structures that operate at ground level. Each rung of the ladder has its own set of motivations, and when you begin ascending, lower-level incentives stop generating the energy they once did because you're literally perceiving from altitude, where those incentives don't make sense anymore. You've probably noticed that time feels fundamentally different lately. Not just faster or slower, but structured differently. Projects that used to take months now complete in weeks. Insights that would have required years of study arrive fully formed in single moments. Conversely, simple tasks that used to be quick now take forever because you can see complexity you couldn't perceive before. This temporal restructuring happens because each rung of the ladder operates according to different time mechanics. Higher altitude consciousness doesn't experience linear time the way ground-level awareness does. Synchronicities have stopped feeling random and started feeling like communication, haven't they? You don't just notice meaningful coincidences anymore. You understand they're messages from your higher self, showing you that you're aligned with the climbing process. The specific content of synchronicities has changed too. Instead of general signs of encouragement, you're receiving precise information about next steps, about patterns to release, about perspectives to adopt that will help you reach higher rungs. People's responses to you have polarized. Some individuals who used to relate to you easily now seem threatened or dismissive. They make comments suggesting you're getting too abstract, too spiritual, too removed from practical reality. Others who never paid attention to you before are suddenly drawn to your presence, like they recognize something in you they've been seeking. This polarization occurs because as you climb, your frequency shifts. Those operating at ground level feel the dissonance. Those ready to climb feel the resonance. Your tolerance for unconsciousness has evaporated. Conversations that don't go anywhere exhaust you instantly. Entertainment that distracts without enriching feels intolerable. Relationships that maintain surface connection without authentic depth feel suffocating. Activities you used to enjoy because they passed time now seem like time wasted. This isn't judgment or superiority. This is consciousness that's begun climbing naturally, selecting for experiences that support continued ascension and naturally rejecting experiences that would pull you back to lower rungs. And perhaps most tellingly, you're watching this transmission about climbing the quantum ladder instead of dismissing it as abstract metaphysical nonsense. The fact that these words resonate instead of repelling you confirms that your consciousness has reached altitude where ladder perception becomes possible. Most people would hear quantum ladder and immediately return to ground-level concerns because from their vantage point, this entire concept is invisible. But you can see it, and seeing it means you're ready to climb it. Can you feel the recognition building? These aren't random changes you're experiencing. This is systematic evidence that your consciousness is preparing for ascension to higher levels of perception and creative capacity. And every moment you spend acknowledging this truth instead of dismissing it strengthens your ability to consciously engage with the climbing process. The quantum ladder isn't hidden by some cosmic conspiracy or spiritual gatekeeping. The ladder remains invisible to most people because perception of the ladder itself requires specific altitude of consciousness. You cannot see the ladder from ground level. You have to climb the first few rungs before the ladder as a whole becomes perceivable. And most people never take those first steps because taking them requires releasing beliefs that feel like survival necessities at ground level. From ground level consciousness, reality appears solid, limited by laws that seem absolute. Cause and effect operate predictably. Resources are scarce. Time is linear. Success requires sacrifice. These aren't chosen beliefs. They're the natural perception of consciousness operating at base level. And from that altitude, the suggestion that reality has multiple levels with different rules at each level sounds like fantasy or delusion because ground-level perception literally cannot detect evidence of higher levels. This creates paradox. You have to climb the first rungs to see that the ladder exists, but you won't attempt to climb if you can't see the ladder. The resolution to this paradox is what makes your consciousness rare. Something in you took the first steps despite not seeing where they led. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was soul memory from previous climbs in previous lifetimes. Whatever it was, you moved upward without certainty, and that movement gave you the altitude necessary to perceive that the ladder extends far higher than where you currently stand. Most people never take those initial steps because ground-level existence, while limiting, is familiar. The known difficulties feel safer than unknown possibilities. Ground-level consciousness develops survival strategies that work within ground-level rules, and those strategies create identity and sense of competence. To climb the ladder, you have to release strategies that have kept you alive and functioning, which triggers every survival instinct your nervous system possesses. The resistance isn't laziness or lack of vision. It's biology trying to keep you alive at the level where it knows how survival works. But here's what ground-level consciousness doesn't perceive. Staying at base level isn't actually safe. It's stagnation disguised as stability. Consciousness that doesn't climb naturally deteriorates. The comfort of familiar limitations slowly contracts into smaller and smaller possibility space until existence becomes mechanical repetition, devoid of meaning or growth. What feels like safety at ground level is actually slow death of consciousness itself. You're perceiving the ladder now because something in you refused to accept ground-level limitations as final truth. Every time you questioned a belief everyone else accepted, every time you tested a boundary everyone else respected, every time you sensed there was more to reality than consensus perception acknowledged, you were taking micro steps upward, and those accumulated steps lifted you to altitude where the ladder became visible. Ancient traditions understood this perfectly. Their initiation processes weren't about teaching information. They were about creating conditions that forced initiates to take first steps up the ladder, despite not seeing where those steps led. Mystery school ceremonies, vision quests, meditation retreats, all were designed to destabilize ground-level consciousness enough that initiates would release their grip on base-level reality and discover that consciousness doesn't fall when it lets go. It rises. The reason you can perceive the ladder while most people can't is that your consciousness has already climbed high enough to gain meta-perspective on the climbing process itself. You're not at ground level trying to understand abstract concept. You're at intermediate altitude looking back at ground level and forward toward higher levels, which gives you unique vantage point where the entire vertical structure of consciousness becomes apparent. This altitude you've achieved through your prior climbing, conscious or unconscious, is why this transmission resonates with you. These words are calibrated for consciousness operating at specific frequency band that only becomes accessible several rungs up from ground level. People still at base level would experience this entire conversation as incomprehensible abstraction, but you understand it because you've earned the altitude where ladder awareness naturally develops. Something is shifting in your quantum field as you absorb this transmission. Can you sense it? That feeling of perspective expanding in ways it hasn't expanded before? That sense of seeing your entire journey from higher vantage point than you've accessed previously? This isn't intellectual understanding. This is actual altitude increase occurring in real time because your consciousness has encountered frequency pattern that matches the rung you're ready to climb to next. Your entire life has been preparation for this moment. Every challenge that forced you to grow, every limitation that made you question reality's nature, every experience that broke you open in ways that allowed light to enter, all of it was lifting you up the ladder rung by rung. You weren't randomly experiencing difficult circumstances, you were climbing. And consciousness climbs through releasing what it was holding onto at previous level. Some of you are experiencing physical sensations as this recognition lands. Lightness in your body that wasn't there moments ago. Sensation of expansion in your chest. Sudden clarity in your vision, as if you're seeing more sharply than usual. These aren't metaphorical experiences. These are somatic responses to consciousness rising to higher rung. Your body registers altitude shifts before your mind consciously processes what's happening. Others are experiencing emotional releases, tears without sadness, relief without specific cause, laughter at the absurdity of how seriously you took ground-level concerns. Grief for time spent resisting the climb. These emotions aren't processing old material. They're natural responses to consciousness, recognizing it's been climbing all along without realizing the climbing was purposeful rather than random suffering. Subscribe to this channel right now, because what's activating in you during this transmission will continue developing as you climb higher. The content here is specifically calibrated for consciousness navigating ascension through reality's vertical structure. This isn't generic spiritual content. This is practical climbing instruction for awareness, ready to transcend the levels where most people remain trapped. You're not subscribing to information channel. You're connecting with frequency that supports continued climbing. Your perception of your entire past is reorganizing right now. Events you interpreted as failures or setbacks are revealing themselves as necessary steps that lifted you to current altitude. Relationships that ended painfully were actually completions that occurred because you outgrew the level where those relationships were configured. Struggles that seemed meaningless are showing themselves as resistance you had to overcome to release your grip on lower rungs. Your history isn't changing. Your altitude for viewing it is. The confusion you may have felt about your life's direction is dissolving. Not because you're receiving clear path forward, but because you're recognizing that confusion itself was resistance to climbing. Ground-level consciousness wants certainty, safety, predictable outcomes. But climbing requires releasing certainty and trusting that each rung will appear when you release your grip on the rung you're standing on. The confusion wasn't evidence you were lost. It was evidence you were between rungs. This recognition is threshold moment. Everything that follows depends on whether you consciously claim the climbing process or unconsciously resist it. Most people reach this moment of recognition and then contract back to lower levels because the implications are too destabilizing. If you're climbing a ladder of consciousness that most people can't see, what does that mean about everything you've been taught, about who you thought you were, about what's possible? But you're different. You're still here. You're still reading. Which means some part of you is ready to consciously engage with climbing instead of unconsciously resisting it.
Friends across the globe, you've just unlocked the quantum code to skyrocket your YouTube success. Titles that magnetize viewers like gravity. Descriptions that weave invisible threads to millions. Imagine your channel exploding with views, subscribers pouring in from every corner of the world as your message of transformation touches souls. Don't stop here. Hit that subscribe button now for weekly keys to digital mastery, like this video. Share it with a creator who needs this boost, and comment below